Nearly 1,000 years ago, the Seljuk Turks migrated from their ancestral home in the Altai Mountains of Mongolia into Asia Minor, also known as Anatolia. Anatolia had been a part of the Byzantine Empire for 500 years prior to the Turks' arrival. The Turks and Byzantines had a frayed relationship, which ultimately ended in the Battle of Manzikert, in which the Turks won and took control of the region. Following this, many of the Seljuks converted to Sunni Islam, which was prominent in the area. They then took up residence in the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, in which they violated many human rights against the Christians and Jews that they had conquered. Examples of this are forcing them to pay extra taxes, bowing to the Muslim tax collectors, not being able to ride horses, no right to bear arms, and living under the law set up by the Quran. In 1095, the Byzantine Emperor Alexius I Comnenus sent a letter to Pope Urban II in Europe. He was asking for aid to fight off the Turks who were now at his doorstep. This led the Pope to organize a gathering in Clermont, France, and it is here where he gave a speech, as recalled by witness Robert the Monk. The opening read, "From the confines of Jerusalem and the city of Constantinople, a horrible tale has gone forth and very frequently has been brought to our ears, namely, that a race from the kingdom of the Persians, an accursed race, a race utterly alienated from God, a generation, forsooth, which has not directed its heart and has not entrusted its spirit to God, has invaded the lands of those Christians and has depopulated them by the sword, pillage, and fire. It has led away a part of the captives into its own country, and a part it has destroyed by cruel tortures. It has either entirely destroyed the churches of God or appropriated them for the rights of its own religion." The Pope then offered all who go east to reclaim this land and aid their brothers' eternal penance. This was very intriguing to many of the knights who attended, because it allowed them to be forgiven for the violent lives they had lived. The Pope then finished with this statement, "Let this then be your war cry in combat, because this is the word given to you by God. When an armed attack is made upon the enemy, let this one cry be raised by all the soldiers of God. It is the will of God! It is the will of God!" To the Christians of medieval Europe, surely the will of God was enough to grant them the right to an ancient land, and to kill thousands upon thousands along the way. Whatever it would take, to the lengths they must go. It was their responsibility to aid their fellow Christians in the East, and as the ancient prophet Jeremiah put it, "Do what is just and right. Rescue from the hand of the oppressor the one who has been robbed." What we need to understand is that the First Crusade was really the second, or at least the second attempt at a crusade. You see, when Pope Urban gave his speech, this spread a sort of patriotism throughout Europe. This inspired many ordinary people to take up arms and to go east as well. Among these people was Peter the Hermit. Peter was a French preacher who, after the Council of Clermont, believing it was his responsibility, traveled throughout Europe gaining support for his own crusade. This became known as the People's Crusade. The People's Crusade is notorious for pillaging many towns for resources and killing thousands of Jews as it made its way southeast for Constantinople. The People's Crusade even raided Byzantine towns, which was not a good look for them, being that part of the reason they had set out was to help the Byzantines. Once the People's Crusade made it to Constantinople, the Byzantines wanted nothing to do with them, so they were quickly ferried over the Bosphorus Strait. Once in Anatolia, they were soon attacked by the Turks and destroyed. Back in Europe, a more successful attempt was being made to go east. This time, it was made of 5 different armies who were all going to meet up in Constantinople, and was being organized by many nobles across multiple countries, 3 of which were French. The first was led by Hugh of Vermandois, which was the smallest of the 5. The second, led by Raymond, Count of Toulhouse, was the largest of the French, and the third was led by Robert of Flanders. The fourth was German, led by Godfrey de Bouillon, and the fifth was the largest and most well-armed. This was an Italian army led by Bohemond, Prince of Taranto. Once all 5 of the armies arrived in Constantinople, they had to swear to Alexius that they would give back any reclaimed land that was formerly Byzantine back to him. This was actually quite hard, however. Alexius had to bribe Bohemond, fought a small battle with some of Godfrey's troops, and Raymond was a struggle, but he eventually agreed. Both Hugh and Robert, however, agreed without a problem. The 5 armies and whatever was left of the failed People's Crusade were now finally in Anatolia. They stayed close to Constantinople for a while, but no Turks ever came. They decided to set off south to siege the city of Nicaea. This was the capital of the Seljuk Empire and where the Sultan's family lived. The Crusaders surrounded the city, but this didn't really work. This is because the city was built by Lake Ascanius, and so it had 3 walls on land and the lake was the 4th, thus allowing for supplies to be delivered. So the Byzantines had to come to their aid. The Byzantines sailed in from the lake and sacked the city. The Crusaders then continued south in 2 groups, one through the Taurus Mountains and one around. They seized the city of Tarsus and headed east, where they established the first Crusader state, the county of Edessa. When the Crusaders got to Antioch, they were unable to get through the city's formidable walls. The Crusaders had to camp outside of the city, where disease ravaged them. Some deserted at this point. Eventually, after a 6-month siege, Bohemond was able to make contact with a Christian soldier inside the city, who apparently had several visions from God. The soldier was convinced by Bohemond to open the gate, but according to Islamicist Ibn al-Athir, the soldier may have been bribed with money. Once the gate was open, the Crusaders massacred the city. Some Turks managed to hold out inside a citadel. Eventually, other Turkish forces arrived and attacked the Crusaders inside the city. The Crusaders did eventually take control of the city, however, losing only 2,000 soldiers compared to a tremendous loss of 10,000 Turks. The Crusaders were now able to head to their final destination, what they deemed to be rightfully their land, Jerusalem. Once the Crusaders had made it to Jerusalem, they had no way to get inside the city, so they began a siege. This went on for about 4 weeks until either one of 2 things happened. It is possible that the Crusaders talked to a holy man named Peter Desiderius, who told them to march barefoot around the city for 9 days and the city would be theirs. The other possibility was that this did not happen. Either way, by coincidence, Genoese ships arrived and the Crusaders raided them. They gained supplies and dismantled the ships. They now had enough wood to create 2 siege engines. On July 15, 1099, the Crusaders finally breached through the wall guarding the ancient city. Once inside, they slaughtered the city's inhabitants in a mass genocide. The estimates are very unclear of how many died in the attack. It ranges anywhere from a few hundred up to 30,000. Both Jews and Muslims were killed by the Crusaders that day. After the Crusaders had succeeded in their quest, many of them returned home to Europe. Those that did stay remained in one of the 4 Crusader states that had been set up. Though the Crusaders did take out a vast number of Islamic people, many still lived in the region. Muslims living in the Crusader states had to pay extra taxes, but were left with many basic human rights, such as being able to travel freely, there was no dress code, and they had many opportunities for work as well. Muslims under Christian rule had better treatment and more rights than Christians under Muslim rule had. One of the Muslims who still lived in the region was the scholar Ibn Jubiyar. Jubiyar describes witnessing many Islamic farming villages who lived in harmony with the Crusaders. This may be as a result of the teachings stated in the Quran, which emphasizes fundamental human rights and dignity, such as the right to life, the right to equality, and the right to property. Nonetheless, Ibn Jubiyar stated that he did not like the fact that these Muslims didn't mind mingling with people he described as being Christian pigs and filth. The overall peace, however, did not last. After the First Crusade came 8 more, in which hundreds of thousands of people would die. Within the next 200 years, Muslim forces would once again drive the Crusaders out of the Middle East. The last Crusader state was that of Acre, which finally succumbed to the Egyptian Mamluks in 1291. Though the Crusades were over, their impact would live on for centuries. Having land in the Middle East set up Europe to new trading routes, and with more coming out of the Middle East, port cities grew. Classical Greek philosophy that was preserved by Arab scholars was brought back into Europe. New knowledge was gained from Muslim scholars about astronomy, math, and medicine. Today, many Christians view the Crusades as a holy war that is justifiable by the need to reconquer rightful Christian land, but have since taken up a responsibility in recognizing its bloody and violent ways. Many Jews and Muslims still view the Crusaders as Christian barbarians who killed millions of innocent people.